It's very good that Ben went on this program, but James O'Keefe is just such a waste of fucking space. And for people who aren't familiar, James O'Keefe, like, what would you say, accosted Ben before the debate, and tried to get,
he rushed him.
and tried to make Ben say something that he wasn't saying. Anyway, enough intro. Let's just play this.
Ben went into the lion's den.
Ben went into the lion's den, which I'm very proud of him for doing, because this was not a hostile. This was a very hostile crowd. It's not a friendly crowd at all. It was Ben, Tim Pool,
Tulsi Gabbard, right?
Tulsi Gabbard, and James O'Keefe. But here's Ben defending the media project of Jacobin versus something like Veritas, and we'll see a little appearance from Tim Pool.
Jacobin is an independent organization. It's not beholden to wealthy investors or stockholders or big donors.
So you just made an insinuation about big donors with Project Veritas. Do you think that was a fair insinuation?
Project Veritas website, a lot of it screams to me, maybe this is wrong, laid out to show donors what they're getting. There's a subheading called results. What the results page brags about is the weakening of tenure protections to make it easier to fire people, which of course, if you care about free speech, is exactly the opposite of what you'd want.
No donor has ever, and I would swear to it under oath, told me what to do.
I feel a lot better being associated with the kind of media organization that actually is interested in taking on the most powerful people in our society, rather than acting as gutter-level snitches to surveil working-class people and try to get them fired.
I gotta say, I was on with Ben about a week before that.
You were in these clips that Veritas is pulling up.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's hilarious. Well, I mean, people should watch the thing that James O'Keefe, like this public school teachers exposed thing. It's fascinating because he thinks, like, he's literally trying to cancel these teachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
For saying like Chris Christie sucks ass, which fucking newsflash, right? It's fascinating because he's undercover filming these teachers actually say what they think about push to charter schools and stuff like that. It's a historical document, but Ben is right that it's not like, it's done to be a gutter level snitch against teachers to get them fired. And so much of this, we're going to be talking about DeSantis a little bit, is an attack on public schools and public teachers.
And I'm just gonna say, and free speech. And I think that, like, Ben, knowing what his audience is worked up about, what Tim Pool and O'Keefe and Tulsi Gabbard, I guess, too, try to promote, is this idea that the left is really against free speech. But Ben, instead of letting it fall into this kind of BS culture war fight that the right prefers it to be in, makes the point that if you're worried about free speech, the biggest threat to free speech is the dictatorship of the bosses, and making the argument that if you believe in free speech, if you believe people should be able to express their opinions, then you should want there to be union protection for folks, even if what the person is saying is disgusting and maybe does deserve for them to be fired or disciplined. You should want to have that kind of system, as Ben makes the point in the debate, in the same way that you want to live in a society that has murder perpetrators have a lawyer, right? Like, if you care about free speech and all this kind of stuff, you should want there to be a system that checks the power of the authorities in the workplace on you. And James O'Keefe tries to spin it, saying Ben is supporting everything that anyone has ever said in a workplace, which is complete bullshit. But I give Ben a ton of credit here for going into a room where he was just going to get booed every time he opened his mouth, making his points regularly, and throwing in some flourishes like gutter level snitches in there, which is a great line. Right. I think it was a very good use of his time.
And let's just address like the thing that James O'Keefe tried to get him on, which is, unions will protect this guy who says the N-word from getting fired, right? And the thing to think about this is, who needs to do the firing? Do you need a boss to come in to save the day, or can you do that collectively as laborers, as people who do the actual job? Unions have perceived. First of all, the history of unions is one of racial solidarity and typically finding things to work together upon, like hammer and hoe, Robin D.G. Kelly foundational text. But if there is just a awful racist, like your unions have their own procedures of dealing with that sort of thing. You don't need a heroic boss to come in and save the day from the evil race. That's an absurd like absurd idea. Look at fucking Elon Musk. Do you think Elon Musk's Fremont factory, which isn't unionized, look at the racism there? Like we could actually these fucking hypotheticals that we have to get into with these jokers. Like there's actually like what's going on in Fremont, those ununionized workers. Do you think those people would be better protected if they unionized? Of course they would.
Mm-hmm. No doubt, no doubt. But we're not going to focus on that debate. Maybe we should have Ben on some time to break it down with us. We wanted to go to Tim Pool and this kind of weird fascination that we're starting to see with Ron DeSantis. And I don't know if this clip is handy yet, Matt, but just up front, we're gonna play something about Tim talking about Ron DeSantis, and at the end of the clip, we'll talk about sort of why this has happened. But I wanted to make a point first about Tim. Who is somebody who always tries to present himself as like, oh, I'm just like a nice little squishy moderate who's just looking at the world, through facts and reason and cutting through the bullshit. What's notable about Tim is despite this kind of presentation, he's been lockstep in with the new movements on the right. And there is no doubt about it that there's this big push right now to make Ron DeSantis be the inheritor of Donald Trump's political machine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, here's this clip now. I mean, Tim Pool likes to describe himself as a milquetoast centrist, even though ever since he did the no-go zone thing in Sweden, he's been pretty lockstep with the right, despite whatever his explicit identifications are. Here's
I think constitutionalists maybe is a better phrase than lawyers.
I think Trump is what you get when the people are neglected for too long. And I went to the Trump rallies, and there are so many people who are like, I've never voted before. I'm voting for this man because he's finally sticking it to the machine. The Republicans and Democrats were snooty elites who thought they were better than everyone else, and that needed to change. So now you've got the Trump populists, the left populists hate the Democrats and hate the Republicans, but support the Democrats because they hate the Republicans more, which is dumb.
Wait,
but the whole thing
is really quick.
Yeah.
Because y'all are going to see this in a second, but whatever you want to say about that kind of critique, again, left populism is a squishy term. It's not a term that I really like to describe the Bernie Sanders movement. But make the criticism about Bernie Sanders' movement maybe shepherding people in the Democratic Party. I reject that. I push back against that. But just accept it for a second. What's so fucking amazing about this clip is in about 30 seconds, this guy is going to start promoting like a lifetime Republican fucking operative as somehow anti-establishment.
Yeah. And I'll just say, like, for the record, I would support a abortion supporting socialist in the Republican Party. Frankly, nothing from a me being a greedy programming content maker standpoint, that'd be fucking wild if there was a right-wing squad.
Yeah.
Or not a right-wing squad, a
Yeah,
Republican squad, a left wing of the Republican Party. That would be fucking amazing. So like this doesn't exist what Tim Pool is describing.
Is just kind of it's falling apart. I actually think Ron DeSantis could probably save the country, but I don't know if he'll actually reform.
Now, this is the amount of depth we get into, or lack thereof, shallowness, we should say, is just, it boggles my mind. And it's a little bit disappointing because it's like, I know it's not just fucking teenagers that watch this kid. Mm-hmm. This guy, he's not a kid, he's older than I am, but like, he has a brain of a child. And I like, this is food for babies, what you're about to hear right now.
Could probably save the country, but I don't know if he'll actually reform it to the degree it needs to be reformed. He would just stop it from imploding. You know what I mean?
He does seem to have the same sort of ability to make Trump like.
This is somebody who made a bunch of hay off of live streaming the Depp Heard case.
Changes, but without his tweets.
But I don't think he'd go as far as we need him to. I also, fair point, Ian brought this up. I don't know if Trump would drain the swamp either. He didn't do it the first time. He brought more swamp monsters, and he got rid of some of them, but brought more in. Maybe he was getting jammed up by the Russiagate stuff, and he couldn't do it.
See, this is how Tim really is a milquetoast fence sitter, but he doesn't want to alienate his Trumper base because he has been just fondling those guys
Mm-hmm.
and making them feel so good for, I mean, years now. And but like you got, like there's a definite like we need to get to DeSantis here. And yeah, I don't know if you have anything you want to say on like what he means by that. Like there's a few things going on in right wing like sort of elite culture. Is one acronym, retire all government employees, which is like
I haven't heard
fascists
that yet.
talk about this
Yeah.
stuff. And it's about, you know, basically or ban like destruction of the sort of administrative state. And it's like that stuff we got to take seriously in a situation where the Supreme Court is doing what it's doing now with regards to the EPA and like all these different things. So like this is what I'm saying. Like Tim Pool he's a Republican propagandist, but not and like our far right propagandist, but not of that name. So like all of his listeners would have thought that Trump actually had the election stolen in 2020. That is not true. You are a fool if you actually think that's true. But Tim was right there playing both sides of that
Mm-hmm.
to the point where he absolutely, I bet you, I mean, anyway, I bet you there are Tim Pool fans that went to that rally, or people who like sort of like share Tim Pool's content. Like, I don't agree with everything this pussy says, but look at what he said about Trump.
I'm going to tell you right now, this is anecdotal, right? But people I've known in my life who maybe still have social media relationships through Facebook or whatever, they love people like Poole. And also, I will note, people like Jimmy Dore, because they're like, well, look at this leftist saying all this kind of pro-Trump stuff. This means that we're right about it.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's like, I mean, the Roland Barthes essay about we don't need to get into Roland Barthes. Let's continue with Tim Pool or with DeSantis, unless there's more you wanted to say. About
Well, did we get to the swamp monster thing?
We did, yeah. He said the
Okay,
swamp monster
sorry, I
thing.
missed that.
So
because you had a good line on that I think is worth re-upping.
Well, I mean, it's just for babies. Like, what do you actually say? Like, but what it also
It's
does
carrots
is,
and peas mashed up for you, baby.
but it flatters his audience again because, like, first of all, he ultimately gives Trump out. Like, maybe it was all Russiagate and he couldn't. That it was all his hands were tied, right? But also he says like he brought some swamp monsters. Name the fucking swamp monsters.
Well, this is just me maybe watching him as broadcaster to fellow broadcaster, right? It's like you gotta say something. You gotta like ground that in something. Like we talk a lot. Like I was talking about how corrupt the Democrats are, and earlier in the show, and you know how they only care about fundraising. But we're showing receipts here, right? The kind of level of conversation that you're getting with Tim Pool is like it's all in your head, right? And at that point, you're just imagining characters like in a movie. It's like, oh, maybe Trump's hands were tied. Well, if that's the case, man, aren't you a journalist, somebody who can point us to this, you know, this or that? Like, where were Trump's hands tied because of the Russiagate stuff that prevented him from draining the swamp, right? Like, you got to steal Ben's line. You got to give me an argument, man. Like, there's nothing going on there.
Yeah, and just for folks, I gotta always shout this out because I think it's some of the best work on YouTube. Timba on Toast has a 2-part series, most recent one from February called Tim Pool Fence Sitter, and it really, I mean, really shows how this strategic thing of like what he's doing when he says like, oh, Trump, he plays every single side and uses it to his credibility. Right, like so he services the Trumpers because it's like maybe it was all Russiagate, but also he services the skeptical of Trumpers that maybe are support Ron DeSantis when he says like, oh, he didn't do everything and he had some limitations as an executive. And yeah, so I got to recommend Tim on Toast there.
Yeah, well, if he names names, he might lose some of that baby audience, which I think is.
It also take work, and Tim Pool is lazy,
which would be hard.
Yeah.
But like, let's move to DeSantis for a second because, you know, I don't want to get too much because it's like we're seeing the Rubin. You did this last week. Rubin and Rogan are pushing this, but we're seeing this nationally. And one thing that I've noted on this program, and others, Majority Report, and our friends at TIR, is that one thing that The only thing that's good about Ron DeSantis is how much of a thorn in the side of Greg Abbott that he is, because Greg Abbott also wants to be president and be the next Trump boy. But as I'll just remind folks, when Governor Abbott shut down the fucking border with Mexico, which was just an absolutely insane and disastrous move, that cost billions of dollars, and it was just like a real nightmare. He was doing that so he could go on Fox News, so that he could get Greg Abbott tough on the border, so that he could propel himself for maybe a 2024 run. But the Chiron on Fox News, when he finally got a spot on Hannity or whatever show he was on, is Greg Abbott the Ron DeSantis of Texas?
It's so great.
Which is like, I love that so much. But let's talk about Ron DeSantis a little bit, because he is the guy I think that they're trying to prime him for. And like, the kind of like, alternative media folks who are pushing him. They're pushing him. I don't know if it's necessarily orchestrated. I think that those guys maybe Poole more. Who knows with Rubin? Honestly, I don't know. But I think Poole's just a weird guy who just sort of wants to go whichever way the numbers are going. So he's going to be pushing DeSantis. But it's very clear that the Republicans, at least a segment of the Republicans, are trying to push DeSantis because he's their boy in a way that Trump wasn't.
Yeah.
To be the guy who inherits the Trump movement, which I've always noted is like, that's the thing to pay attention to, is that Trump, was certainly a Republican in the sense of his ideology and his hatred of poor people and minorities and stuff like that. But he was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And, you notice when he was in power, the limitations of the figurehead of the presidency and then like the actual operations of the state are two different things, which is why Trump talked one way but governed basically as a Republican. I'll get this next week. Sorry about this, guy. I'm just saying, like, the Republicans are trying to get somebody to inherit the Trump movement, and they'll present him as an outsider, and DeSantis is their guy. So is Tim Pool doing this because he's getting talking points from people? I don't know if I could fairly claim that. I think he's somebody who's seeing that there's action and movement in that direction, and is just very happy to fill and promote that. Well, let's talk about DeSantis a little bit, Matt, because you talked last week, I think, about some of his COVID stuff. But this school thing is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so we'll start with Chris Rufo. Chris Rufo is the guy who's helped stoking the anti-CRT panic and also now anti-gay LGBT trans panic. A real bad guy. And that is me censoring myself a little bit because we're doing a free public show this week. Here is he released a few slides from new educational materials on Twitter, and we'll get into this because he said, first one, well, Chris says, incredible. The DeSantis administration has partnered with Hillsdale College to develop this fantastic new training program for teachers on American history. This is how you drive policy to shape culture. I mean, a lot of retweets. Way more than quote tweets. This is being received eagerly by the right wing folks. A lot of people saying this is how it's done. So how is it done? Well, let's go to the first slide here. Opposition to slavery, emphasized by two guys who owned slaves. Actually, I'm not sure who the guy on the right is. I know the guy on the left is. I assume the guy on the right is Thomas Jefferson. Maybe
It looks like
TJ.
But
on the left, we got Washington, it being among my first wishes to see some plan adopted by which the slavery in this country may be abolished by law. Now, one thing to note, it could have also been noted about Washington is he could have freed his slaves individually. I mean, putting aside that he helped birth a slave nation as a founding father, put that aside just for a quick, brief moment, and owned tons of them, multiple dozens, I will say. I don't think 100, but like I think probably a good like 30, 40, 50. Ultimately didn't get it done. Also, Thomas Jefferson, the abolition of domestic slavery is the greatest object of desire in those colonies where it was unhappily introduced in the infant state. That the only reason Thomas Jefferson is saying that is because he's blaming the British for it. He's like, oh, you made us do this. And guess what? Britain got rid of the slave trade and stopped using slavery. I mean, we can talk about how cynical it might have been, given you lost the Americas and no one control it. But the fact remains that they were taunting us for still having slaves, like, well, our country was still a teenager.
Can just to interject here, if I may, like, number one, like, weak boy shit, TJ's opposition to slavery that
Yes.
gets promoted all the time. Oh, Thomas Jefferson thought it was so bad, but he maintained that system. He promoted that system and he expanded that system. I don't care. Oh my God. Oh, Thomas was, when he was writing in his diary, he was so sad about it and felt. It's like, this is the. I don't want to get problematic, but like, there's something about the right wing that I've always found to just be incredibly weak and cowardly and spineless. And I know it's not PC to say this guy, but just like weak boy kind of stuff, right? And like TJ is like the epitome of that. Where it's like, I'm so conflicted personally about this, and you're supposed to respect me for it. While I'm raping, my slaves, continuing their exploitation.
14.
So I can live a fancy boy life and drink nice French wines and like stock my library because I can't work. I'm too weak to do like a day's labor in my life. It's just like, I don't know. It's not the only thing. Like the rot in Thomas Jefferson is so much deeper than this. But just like for a movement right now that is so much about like masculine virility and all this kind of stuff, to sit here and say like you have a personal commitment to like take them at the word, right? That Thomas Jefferson and George Washington had this real personal commitment to wanting the system to be end, and they were so weak-willed that they not only didn't end it but expanded it. It's just so pathetic to me. It's pathetic to watch. And obviously the consequences are much more severe than just like their cowardice. But just re-upping that one, you're seeing these right wingers try to promote these guys as, oh, they knew then and they were trying so hard to fix this. No, they knew didn't do anything about it, friend.
And let's give a little bit of history lesson, because really what this should be called is make Florida students dumb as fuck. That's what this program should be called, because let's interrogate what Jefferson means by abolition there. He meant if we got rid of slavery, we're sending them all back to Africa. All of them, because it was very explicit, wrote about this all the fucking time. He was fixated on it. We cannot mix races, despite him, as we mentioned, raping his 14-year-old slave and procreating with her. He fundamentally thought, like, if everybody's doing that, we can't have a society. So we're going to need to repatriate them back into. So that's what he doesn't mean what abolitionists meant when they say, well, I mean, some of them actually did still mean that too, but that's what we need to understand abolition. And it's relevant because, like, this stuff, it doesn't stop at like 1864. That ideology of need to be separate led to Jim Crow. That's like American apartheid thought, and we know that that's still having effects to this day. And so that's just the first fucking slide here. Let's continue. A Gettysburg Address, I mean, pretty anodyne one here. It just tells you what 7 years ago I mean. Thanks for that. The proposition that all men are equal, put out there for proof, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, soundbite from the 4th of July speech.
Ooh.
And before we get into any sort of with the title there, let's just put the sound bites. It's sound bites, like it's post-game press conference in the NBA. This is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and your political freedom. Continues, fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Now, if that's all you're providing to folks, you could take that a number of different ways, frankly. You could take the actual historical way, which is that, let me just back up a little bit here to take a full context of the speech, which was called What to a Slave is the 4th of July, American Independence. A fuller quote is, here it is. I'll just put this up too, because I think this is an amazing speech that everyone should know about, and to use it like in discrete ways that like imply the opposite message, I think is a crime against history. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty and unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, I can't read that. Brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There's not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the point is clear here that it's just so disgusting of the way that they cut these things out. And as I think the tweet that you put up mentioned, that it's just like, these people aren't interested in teaching history. They're interested in whitewashing it. And like, I'll just say this as somebody, as a Southerner, somebody who was brought up in that world. There's so much bullshit like what Rufo is trying to do that's already in existence. And this is just the next chapter in this kind of whitewashing, selecting quotes, to make it seem like Lincoln was just like a horrible, horrible racist who didn't take emancipation seriously, or making it seem like this speech, what is the 4th of July to a slave? What to the slave is the 4th of July, is somehow like just like loving like
because
speech about how this country is so great and can do no wrong, instead of the very phenomenal. And I think that like they're not for the reasons Chris Rufo wants to push it. I think that there is something that the left could learn from the Frederick Douglass speech, right? Which is that, like, these kind of formal promises do sort of, they not sort of, they matter, right? The irony that we all see in, for example, like things like the Declaration of Independence, and it's how incongruent it was with the system of human slavery in this country. Like, those things matter, not they matter in a historical context, and they matter today. And Frederick Douglass is like putting that on trial, putting that in front of everybody's face. And I think the left can sort of deal with that too, in the same way that, like, we just put up our Lenin letter to the American workers, right? Like, recognizing that there is this kind of radical streak in the American political tradition, particularly the popular American political tradition, not so much the elite one, right? Like, there's something that's worthwhile to do there. But the kind of ahistorical BS that the right wing is trying to put forward is just so clearly a facade to try to whitewash the horrors of this country and not to reckon with them or rectify them.
Yeah, because if you start understanding how the founding fathers had to think of certain sectors of people, certain just populations as beasts of burden, then you might start asking different questions about your place in the workplace today.
Yeah.
I want to continue here. We got a great article in Miami Herald. How a small, this is by Anna Sabalas and Summer Brugal. How a small conservative Michigan college is helping DeSantis reshape education, Florida. This is from a July 1st of this year. In April, the Department of Education made national headlines for its decision to reject dozens of math textbooks because they included references to critical race theory and other prohibited topics and unsolicited strategies, officials said at the time. A Herald Times review of nearly 6,000 pages of textbook examination showed only 3 of the 125 reviewers found objectionable content. Two of the three were affiliated with Hillsdale College. One was Jonah Apple, a sophomore student majoring in political science, and the other was Jordan Adams. Are these like random names? You got a random name generator? Jordan Apple and Jordan Adams, a civics educator specialist at the college. Honestly, like, are we just cloning right-wing freaks? Apple and Adams were invited by the state to review, quote, prohibited topics. The state of Florida invited them to DeSantis. Though Florida Department of Education officials have not responded to questions inquiring why they specifically invited people to scour for contentious issues like critical race theory. The state paid, quote, prohibited topics reviewers $500 per review, $170 more than they paid others who reviewed books to ensure the books matched the rest of the state's math standards, state's records show. The Florida Department of Education reached out to the college to participate in the review, but Hillsdale spokeswoman Emily Stacks Davis said the college declined, but provided the names of individuals who might aid the Florida Department of Education in this effort. So fucking sophomore. Florida Department of Education has not commented on why it hired student and civics specialists from Hillsdale to review Florida's math textbook for prohibited topics. But the college played a more active role in helping the state revise its civics standards and develop a civics training program that teachers statewide can volunteer to participate in and earn $7 stipend for attending. You get $700 of taxpayer money to go listen to these freaks talk about George Washington actually chopped down that cherry tree. Hillsdale was among 4 groups that the Department of Education partnered with to create the training program.
Yeah. No, I mean, these guys are very worried about government
spending
too much money, except for this. Yeah.
Hillsdale's digital digest, Imprimis, features the writing of conservative thinkers like Christopher Rufo, who has worked with DeSantis to combat issues like critical race theory and gender identity. Combat issues. Imagine combating issues like that. I'm combating issues like anti-racism and accepting trans people and non-binary people. The publication also includes articles with titles like, quote, "The January 6th Insurrection Hoax," "The Disaster at Our Southern Border," "Gender Ideology Run Amok," "Critical Race Theory, What It Is and How to Fight It, and Who Is in Control, The Need to Rein in Big Tech." I mean, that sounds fine enough to me, but I mean, I also don't cover for like Peter Thiel. Through that brand, Hillsdale has also been able to rapidly grow its network of charter schools in Florida. The Barney Charter School Initiative is, quote, "devoted to the revitalization of public education through the launch and support of K-12 charter schools," according to the college.
Classical charter schools.
And this is at the same time. I mean, this is a article. I should have not cut off where this was from. But article: Florida teacher fired for violating DeSantis' critical race theory ban. This is Amy D'Onofrio was told to get put down a Black Lives Matter poster. She declined to, and they ultimately settled. But she's no longer a teacher.
Yeah, I mean, this is. Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, that was it. Yeah, go ahead. No, that's it.
No, I know. I was just gathering my thoughts, friend.
Sorry, man. Sorry for rushing you.
DeSantis could save this country if he wanted to. I mean, that's the words from Tim Pool's mouth right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care too much, honestly, to fixate on him. I want to fixate on DeSantis and what this means for the country. Just, remember what this fucking guy is saying, what he's talking about when they're saying like, "Oh, this guy could maybe save this country from itself." That like this is the kind of shit that they're saying is like a good feather in the cap here, for this boy. I mean, it's absolutely frightening. As a Texan, it's a little relieving to see other states maybe take the ire of the country, under their own. I'm just kidding, but no, I mean it's truly frightening, and like this is why like public education is so important.